Well, then I'm going to start by myself. Well, thanks a lot for the introduction. Thanks to the whole team for this invitation. And thanks to you all for being here. It's actually quite nice for me to be included in this program, this place, but also in the context of the festival, the symposium. I missed the presentations yesterday, but I was there on Friday, and I already could see that some of the works, obviously, and positions represented here kind of resonate potentially with my own work. So I'm going to jump into my contribution today. It's a kind of presentation. I guess the main parts are excerpts from two films that I produced in Morocco in collaboration with artists and scientists. But I know this is supposed to be a workshop. There's not so much interaction that I'm proposing. But of course, since we are all already loaded with ideas and impressions, I think there is some potential for discussion, exchange. I mean, I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information from my own research. I think it's a good moment, 3 days into the sort of symposium and festival, to actually try to reflect on what we've seen already and see how some of these positions can resonate together and where also some of the problems can be identified and demanding some sort of reflection or exchange. But just to situate my own work, so how does that work? Like this. The sort of basis for my presentation today is a book that I published recently, which is kind of way of turning my PhD research into a book. So the book is here. It's also available as an open access PDF online. I'll give you the link at the end. It's called Sawt, Bodies, Species, Sonic Pluralism in Morocco. So obviously I've spent quite some years engaging with sound, listening, and ecological voices, perhaps, in the context of Morocco. So it's mostly non-musical or extra-musical sound that I'm sort of wanting to look at. This happened mostly in collaboration with local artists, musicians, and scientists. So with this idea to engage into environmental listening, not only through my own perspective, but also through other people listening and perception of the environment. So the book itself and the research involves several case studies, which includes music archives. Also, one study on the Agadir earthquake from 1960, which I also try to address as a sonic phenomenon and environmental at the same time. There's also, of course, a lot to be learned from Sufi practice and more case studies that are in the book. Today, I suggested that I could focus a bit more specifically on this idea of ecological and extra-human voices. These are terms that comes all the time, again and again, in a lot of literature. I can see that also in other people's work. So what is ecological voice, or what could it be? Mia Chinen wrote about it a little bit in the sense of that extra-human voices raise questions about the subjectivity, presence, and agency of extra-human beings, such as animal, plants, and other creatures and entities. So these questions resonate with ontological co-formation of human and extra-human beings, in contrast to traditional naturalist taxonomies. And this is something that I already recognized, for example, in the installation upstairs. This idea to go against conventional taxonomic separation between humans and other living beings, for example. So that's a question that's easy to say, that's easy to claim. Yeah, let's undo these boundaries, but how to do that actually? What does it mean actually? So that's one of the problematic that has been for me important. Then also Dominique Petman wrote interesting things about extra-human voices. He writes, voice does not represent an intrinsic characteristic of any given sound. It is much more a transitive event resulting from the affective experience of the listening subject. In order to be considered a voice at all, extra-human manifestations must therefore resonate intimately with the listener. If ecological voices are immanently singular, this does not prevent humans from experiencing alliances, sympathies, and harmonies with other species through the very process of co-constitutive listening. So, non-human voices are very singular and difficult to sort of apprehend, but Beckman suggests that there are ways of engaging with such voices. So that's just a little bit of sort of theoretical background of my study. I'm gonna now play an excerpt of a video called Stone Sound, which we produced together with the artist Gilles Aubry Sawt in Morocco. He lives in a village north of Fez. And Gilles made this decision after his art studies to go back to his village to live, which is a bit unusual for artists in Morocco because usually artists want to live in big cities. But for him, it made more sense to do so. So it also involved building himself a house using local material, and his art practice itself is also very much based on natural material. So at some point he told me about his relationship to stones, and this made me very curious. He said that he literally grew up with stones all around his place, and so we decided to engage into a series of joint experiments, into stone sounding experiments. And this brings us to the question of what it can mean to live together with stones. And by extension, also in the book, I elaborate a little bit on this idea of oral co-domestication between people and extra-human beings or the environment. So I'm going to play the video and perhaps read a little bit from the book on top of it at some point. Let's start. Sounding stones like we did during our experiments is not a very common thing to do, even for a sound artist. It was not our intention to turn stones into musical instruments, nor to create musical effects like rhythmical patterns or timbral compositions. Our sounding by tapping was much more a questioning of the stones, as Gilles Aubry said, a way of knocking at their ontological door, or perhaps a kind of artistic auscultation. In Sawt's words, sound appears as a byproduct of material encounters and, as such, retains the characteristics of the material object from which it originates. As acoustic traces of things, sounds vary according to things themselves. Sawt's sound descriptions pertain to the weight, hardness, hollowness, size, and texture. It's better to hit a stone with another stone, he adds, in order to keep intact the stone sound. There is therefore a direct analogical connection between things and their sound that is also maintained in the recording. From my position as a sound artist and researcher, I had to face contradictory feelings resulting from the double mediation of my auditory experience with the sound of stones. On the one hand, my microphone was telling me that stone sounds, like any other sounds, are simply the audible manifestation of material vibration. On the other, I had a sincere interest in Gilles Sawt's affective story of relating to stones through sound. I found myself confronted with two different material sound concepts, one abstract, autonomous, universal sound concept, and one particular stone sound concept situated in affective. Sawt invited me to join him in a kind of plural sound perspective in which the terms of acoustic science, geology, technology, embodied knowledge, and affect could be renegotiated in favor of a meaningful cohabitation between people and stones. For Sawt, stone sound is the expression of gravity, both in the sense of heavy force and seriousness. In gravity, he finds stability, strength, balance, heat, protection, and breath. Sawt's stone sound expresses the continuum between physical vibration and the perceived sense of it, between material ontology and phenomenology, between nature and technology, and between life and non-life. Sonic pluralism, however, is not just about combining multiple sound epistemologies, but much more fundamentally about creating socially relevant continuities between them. The hybrid and polysemic status of things therefore needs to be stabilized through a continuous process of negotiation. Negotiation is an important aspect of sonic pluralism, enabled in everyday life by social interactions. Artistic collaboration is a particular form of negotiation, characterized in my exchanges with Sawt by performativity and mutual learning. What make a bit more sound? Okay, I'm gonna leave it there. It's, of course, the problem with videos is that it takes time, and I don't want to use all the time I have just with the videos. But Okay, where is the presentation? Is it here? Okay, I can't find it anymore. Sorry. I'm gonna find it here. Yeah. So maybe that's an opportunity for a little exchange between us. What struck me in this exchange with Gilles Aubry is, of course, the way he speaks about stones, and especially his relationship to stones, and about sound. And sounding, stones, is a way of engaging with both these things, what is stone and what is sound, between us. And the result of that was a number of statements that he made. He pretty much performed for me as a collaborator researcher. So he comes with a number of statements about what sound and stones are for himself, and that's also how he comes to this idea of stone sound in one word, right? It's not just the sound of stone, but it's a particular kind of sound. It's stone sound, and that's the whole sort of core of what interests me, is that stone sound is not the same like any other sound. And in order to understand better what this can come to mean from his position, then of course his statements are really interesting. So perhaps it went a bit too far, but I hope you get through the video. And now a couple of examples that I've gathered here from his statements about stone and sound. What I would like to invite you into is this idea to figure out what kind of, how to translate Sawt's knowledge of stones into new questions for ourselves about sound. That means the statement by the artist here, they come a bit like answers to a number of questions that are not formulated. Even not I formulated this question, it's just through our discussions, these statements emerge. And it's possible to, from the answers, so to say, to wonder, okay, what were the questions that were asked? And I think that's where it becomes productive also for someone else, like a composer like myself, or perhaps some of you, to wonder, okay, considering the kind of relationship that he described about himself and stones and sound, is it possible to sort of generate or think of questions that we could ask to ourselves? And this in turn could possibly become the starting point for a new composition or a performance, or at least for a reflection about our own relationship to sounds. Because in fact, I also had to realize that I don't have a particular relationship to stones, right? I didn't grow up in such an environment. So, I mean, of course, Gilles Aubry was a great guide in this kind of world of stones, but for my own practice, I realized that in a way, it would be interesting to consider in what ways my own relationship to sounds, and certain sounds in particular, could be compared or to his relationship to stones, because that's what is, of course, kind of remarkable. Is his attention to stones, his way of perceiving them, but also of relating to them. He pretty much built his house in stone and other material, and the way he speaks about it, it turns stones into significant other beings or extra-human beings. Stones are not dead material to him, but they are slow, stagnating material, but pretty much sort of living, I would say. So this kind of sentences that he basically shared with me, I'm wondering what, I'd be curious to hear perhaps from you if it resonates with you, and how you could imagine that it become perhaps a starting point for a sort of questioning about of your own relationship to sounds. I don't know, does that sound crazy what I'm telling you, or is it too fast?
I have something to
Yeah,
say.
yeah. What would you say?
What is striking here? Okay, what is striking on this video is that he's not trying to make music anyway. He's only questioning the stone. That's what is interesting. But what should we do of that? Because as a composer, I would use that sound for something. But is it right to do so? Because that's the question. He is using the stones as stones, but he's not trying to see if they resonate like he wants. He's just questioning them in different aspects or circumstances. But it's not, this is a French term, lithophonie. It's not lithophonie at all.
No, it's not,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah. Well, I guess it's a very good question. It's also perhaps carrying some assumption about who we are in this room. You know, as composers, or perhaps also as performers. In my case, I see myself certainly as a composer, performer, but not only. This question of questioning ontologically what a stone might be goes, I think, beyond just musical questions or compositional questions. So that's where I think that's the whole point also of this symposium or festival, is the fact that we want to bring our music practice somewhere else, at least, to probably different places, but activated by the sort of emergency of the climate crisis and environmental change. We sense that this practice, this musical practice, somehow needs to connect to other places and beings in our lives. So that's where perhaps the mediation of someone like Gilles Aubry Sawt can be really interesting, because a little bit also like the performance we saw in the garden before, it's obviously not only about sound. And my whole research in Morocco is exactly about that. And this I forgot to mention, but it's a sort of general also important thing for the whole book, is the fact that in Arabic, sound is the term for sound in Arabic is Sawt, hence the title of my book. But Sawt at the same time also means voice. So it's sound and voice, which in a way has, I guess, far-reaching consequences, because it points to something that is more than just sound. It also points to the body, for example. And many of Abdelgil's statements, that some of which we can read here, they actually also point to the body and his body, his self, and the way engaging with stones affects, the potential of his body, of perception. And that's where it brought me to think that, at school, when we study music composition, we're actually very rarely asked to consider the effect of sound of our body, but not just sound, in general, but particular sound and where it comes from. Because I know that it's perhaps too little time to engage deeper in real time with those questions, I have just a few questions to offer. It's, of course, just a few questions that could be part of a much longer list, and that should also be perhaps much more personal in a way, because what sound can mean to each of us is probably very different, and that's where it becomes productive, because it is exactly those differences that are supposed to lead to a kind of interesting potential in composition or performance, or other things even. So, what do sounds mean to me, and how do they participate in my existence? It's a very general question, but it's not something that was asked to me, when I was studying sound, and then what do sounds give me, and how do they transform me? This idea of transformation is very, very important, very central in Abdelgil's statements. And he says, for example, stones give me breath, they give me risk. So this has to do with a particular kind of experiences that he engages with through sound. When he walks, when he falls, perhaps, I mean, years and years of interaction with his environment leads to the way he sees and understands stones, but also by extension and through the exchange with me about sounds. What did I learn from sounds? I think it's also very general, but it's also interesting. Are all sound equal? Which ones matter? Especially to me, that's in the case of Gilles. Obviously, stone sound is absolutely not the same like any other sound. It is loaded with all this affect, this meaning that he projects and sees and experience through stones. How can sounds become a home? I think that's a great question, because in his case, it's literally what he did. He actually built himself a house where stones could exist as beings together with other materials. And he says, well, it's a place where I can be myself. So it's very existential also. It's not about a sort of very superficial relationship to sound. It's actually, what does stone or sound or both mean for my existence, actually. And that's very, I find that very poetic, but also potentially quite strong, exactly because it demands for us to not only consider sound as sound objects, as things that can be manipulated or turned into a lithophone, I think again another object, but in fact that a certain decision, and this can be compositional decisions, are made in terms of for existential reason almost. So yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to share. But yes, I see.
I think this was.
So since you're asking such direct personal questions also of our relationship, I would like to maybe just a few things that are going through my head. I was just hiking in the Alps, and there was this moment of, when I was looking at the landscape where I was walking, and the bigger different kinds of stones and geological substance of these stones break up into small stones, and they're all laid out there, they were glimmering and so on, so they really looked like plants in a sense. There was no difference from the plant to the stone. So this is one reaction. And the other question that I have a little bit about what you were showing is that I didn't, the artist didn't really, for me, I didn't read it, talk about stone as a sounding stone. It was just the stone, but not the sound of stone. So it doesn't really answer. I would have asked, what does the sound of the stone mean? Because there's no, I didn't see any, if you say it's something that means a lot to me from where I come from, I was surrounded by stones and so on, there's no relation that you actually sounded it. It made a difference to water. If you live next to a river, you always hear it. And you always also talk about the sound. So he was doing something in the video that to me had no, I don't know where that actually comes from. I didn't. So maybe you can say more about that. And regarding this, I have to say, I was thinking what could a relation be to our situation. And I think if you look around here, for us, stones are a building material, because you're also saying a home. And for me, that's totally important, the building and the resonance, and how this manifests in sound is actually the resonance, the acoustics of the room. And for me, this is always completely important. Does it sound? Does the stone or the material that the room is made of, is it sharp? Is it too, edgy? Or does it breathe? And so there's a very direct relationship always for stone as building material and all the other materials that we use and sound. So this is just an answer or a perspective.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kerstin. I think this is great. That's the kind of interaction I was hoping for. So, first of all, of course, because of the limited time, it's hard to watch the whole video properly and then potentially engage with even more of our exchange with Gilles. So for this, I can only point to the book, which also contains the links of the video. So it definitely just basically needs more time to engage with the whole thing. But in the text that I wrote about this experience, there's much more example of Gilles' statements about the sound of stones and how to potentially reconsider what sound might mean in that, through this kind of engagement. Because obviously he refuses to separate between stones and their sound. And that's a very big statement, and that goes very much against this kind of epistemology, the modernist sound epistemology, which says that the sound of things is fundamentally different from these things. And so there is a little bit of epistemological resistance, because he is not a fool, he knows about acoustic science also. But from his position, it makes more sense to consider the sound of stones like pretty much loaded with the same qualities like stones itself or themselves, right? So he says that it's, that's why also he was telling me you should hit on the stones with another stone in order to keep the stone sound. So there's a whole sort of different understanding and about what material is and how certain manifestations, such as the sound of this material, can be interpreted. I have to say that also resonate with what has been described as a sort of local ontological model of, making sense of the world, and it's not a naturalist like we would say the Western model would be, but much more analogical in the sense that the relationship between things and their name, for example, is much more like a continuum. So there's not like clear this conceptual separation between categories, such as objects and their name, for example, or object and their sound. They also this model also includes a number of dichotomies. Like in our case, it would be humans versus nature, for example, and that's a very strict separation between humans and nature. There is no possibilities of being in between somehow. Whereas in the local ontological model, there are also dichotomies which are different. So it's not, for example, human versus nature, but it's the domestic versus the wild, for example. And the domestic includes animals and plants. But of course, the wild animals and plants, they are a category of their own. But also the good news is that the border between these two categories, they are much more permeable. That means that it's not, this ontological status, it's not fixed. It can evaluate according to certain circumstances.
There was another
Yes, excuse me.
No. So I think maybe you partially slight continuation of Kirsten's. I suppose I'm wondering, is it problematic at all that in order for us and for him, the artist, to hear the sound, he has to enact it? So he becomes, we're talking about this, maybe I'm not sure if I can express this properly, I'll try, but so a lot of what he describes as his relationship and the cocooning of stones, the safety, that's without sound, or at least it's without sound that we perceive. So is there any level where we're talking about something that is felt before it's heard, and does it need to be heard to be experienced? So, touching a stone, texture, I guess a little bit like Kirsten, I'm finding a little bit of a divide between, even though it's really interesting to just hear what you said there, because to him there is no divide, and yet the process of enacting the sound for me causes the divide, a potential divide, and so it sort of potentially puts the human back into our dominant state, where in order for the stone to be appreciated, or to be, not to be made into musical material, not to be made into anything, but to be experienced on our level, we have to enact it. So maybe a simpler way of asking is it equal sound conversation when it rains?
Yes, okay, thank you for the questions. This last question formulation, I don't know. I was going to react of the earlier formulations. And I think there is, everything that Gilles Aubry is saying, and of course, here I cannot really speak for himself, but still, it is informed by experience, right? It doesn't come out of the blue. Even though that's a hard claim to make, each of us, it's always a mix of something we've read and experience, so it's a hybrid kind of thing. But what was really central in our exchange is also the fact that he built his home himself. That means he had to cut the stones. And cutting stones, and we're talking about large stones, comes with a whole sort of knowledge and skill and experience. So that's before that experiment of wandering around the rocks and tapping on them. We started with a wall that he built himself. And there, of course, a lot of interesting statements also emerge through the importance of the ear to find the cracks, and to cut stones, like big stones. So that's, that would be my question to you. What do you do with that? Is that music or not? And if, with that question, I think it would also, in a way, let me to say that many of these questions that you are asking are a bit your own problem. At least they are not a problem for Gilles. But it's still interesting to discuss. But I think for me the whole point was to re-question my own practice and understanding of what a stone can be and how to live with them. So on the ground, it was relatively easy for me to sort of follow Gilles in his performance, literally, and engage with his speech, and basically to try to listen like he is doing. Later on, writing about it was a bit more difficult, because once you write in a sort of academic context, it becomes, weird to speak about, to write about living stones. So and of course he was not there anymore. So the problem I had was when it was about writing academically about it. So perhaps part of this problematic is now imported in this, house of academy. But I guess, there are different levels, and I don't know what to add more to that. I think very nice. I think these are questions that float a little bit, and my idea by asking you to formulate some question was to see where, some new question can emerge between those that we're already familiar with and new ones that can get inspired by such.
Perhaps I can just.
Sure.
I wanted to add a very short comment, more like about my experience, because I lived in a place with a lot of stones, and I can relate so much to a lot that was said, but exactly what we were saying, I'm very interested in these methods of communication, because in my case I relate so much with everything, like the breath and the stability, a lot of things, but I never played them in, let's say, a percussive way. I'm saying a very, let's say, because I'm a flutist and I play the concert flute, and the flutes I play, they are made of silver or steel, and for me they are the stones transformed. So the way I would communicate is always playing the flute. It was an obvious thing that for me, the flute is also stone, and it's also breath and a lot of listening, the wind going through the stone. But it really, for me, this communication, the way he does it, and that's the thing that is so interesting, how each one developed these methods of communication. And I think that's perhaps what you were saying, how the process of how he did the first stone hitting, and how this became a sort of language back and forth. That's very personal and very interesting. So it's
well, thanks. That's a great Yeah, great story. I mean, I think it's exactly the point that you said, you know, that it depends on your position. And also I have to, of course, precise that what we did, the stone sounding, the one in the video, it's not a practice that we usually have. That's something that we decided to do together. In fact, it's also because these big rocks that we see in the video, they sound surprising, and if we didn't have enough time to hear all these differences, it's because it's carved by erosion. So it's also a way to sort of sonify erosion, right, in the landscape somehow. So some of these big rocks, they sound surprisingly hollow, for example. But you know, we were playing with this being at the border of music or art, but it was also saying we needed a starting point. But when you say that a flute can be reconnected to stone, that's of course very interesting, because the metal has been extracted from some kind of stone environment, right? So when we reconsider, especially material objects, through a possible, by tracing back the sort of history of their making, or via other channels, we can find a way of reconnecting that to an environment. I think that's an interesting step that can be taken. If
No, one more.
Okay, one more, sure.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
One question that comes up for me is also, because you briefly mentioned first that your work has also often touched questions of Sufi faith, and Abdel Jalil also mentioned the Quran, and then his last statement also included the divination of the word through this practice. So I would be just curious to know, can you kind of, like, in order to understand this practice or be empathetic about it, how much is it possible to separate it from faith? I suspect he's also a Sufi kind of person, but that's my suspicion. And I was thinking, other than hitting the stone, where I think he also talked about the sonic quality of stone, and this is a bit in a Sufi idea, I think, that as far as I understood him, when he crosses mountains, crossing stones, it increases his breath, and the body gets more breathing, and this is a very Sufi thought, I think, and it's kind of an interaction between his sound and the stones, provoking a different kind of breathing and different sounding. So
transformation of the body.
It's very,
somehow, yeah.
I thought was very interesting.
Yes, yes, you're right on. I mean, of course, there is this connection. I mean, well, I guess I'm not going to comment on the idea of religiosity or not. It's, I mean, he's informed by that, and he makes references to it, but he's not a heavy practitioner. I think he's basically, you know, he's an artist. An artist sort of synthesize everything together into this practice. So he's very much, I don't know, a sort of philosophy on its own, you know. So I don't want to comment too much on that, but of course certain references to certain images, the Quran or this breath thing is certainly very important. And it basically informs. So my job in the writing was a bit to trace back that to philosophies that, you know, are also present historically in Morocco, and Sufism is probably the major one next to the Salafism that, you know, correspond to the ruling authorities. And there has been not only sort of conflicts in terms of philosophy, but also political. I mean, pretty much the Sufi leaders, the political leaders, have been sort of sidesteps right before colonization. So that's why Sufism has a particular status nowadays in Morocco. It is, of course, important as a practice for health, for the mind, and it is respected in that terms by the authorities, but when it wants to be political, then it's like, no. And so these things also participate in a form of dissent against the state, because, of course, Sufi also like Sufi healing, you know, all these sort of rituals and trance and all that is a way to oppose against biomedicine that is supported by the state somehow. So it goes pretty deep in terms of what it means for the body, and that's why the body became this sort of a central reference also in my research, because everything transits through the body, and in particular this fragmented post-colonial body that carry this experience of colonization. So these are all things that are in my book, but I simply don't have enough time. So I guess you wanted to point that.
Yes, we are.
We are kind of getting. But okay.
There's one more question.
Sure. Well, we could. I mean,
That's okay.
do you mind if I just? I'm not gonna obviously. I think play more for my presentation. I was gonna go somewhere else on the Atlantic coast where I made a research residency and a film in collaboration with a scientist, Younes Boundir, who is a biologist, and a performer, Iman Zubai, who we invited to come. She's also a vocal performer. So decided how to listen to marine life, which is fundamentally silent, we would say. I mean, if you go there with a microphone, there's not much to record, but also to pollution, because this region near Safi is a big sort of industrial center in Morocco, especially with phosphate production and transformation. So it's what the kind of landscape you see there. And of course, this has big sort of impact on the environment, about people's health, but also about marine life. So this notion of interspecies performance, which I was sort of wanted to bring into the presentation, well, again, that's just a sort of theoretical background that Mia Tainen describes it as a project that engaged with the modern human, stressing the need to unlearn deeply ingrained Western ideas about human separatedness, sovereignty, and exceptionality. That's something that I found, for example, exactly in the exhibition upstairs about the Baltic Sea or North Sea. This idea, many activists and Western thinkers and artists make this kind of grand claim. Okay, let's reconsider, let's become more horizontal, let's undo this separation between humans and nature. Let's rethink our relationship to other species. Let's become these other species. It sounds great, but it's actually also very pretentious depending on where you are situated. I could not make so easily such claims. But of course, for certain people in certain positions, this can make sense, I thought that when I was seeing the performance outside, I thought that these people perhaps have such kind of knowledge/experience from their position where they could probably say something interesting about this. And I think also that Gilles Aubry has something in his life, in his existence, his experience that allows him to perhaps, it's all over his statement that obviously stones are not separated from humans in such a way. So basically, interspecies performance is a scholarly term that emerged to try to situate a little bit a number of performances. We did that a little bit with, we attempted that with Iman Zubai, who one sees on the photo. This led to this film that is 30 minutes long, so I wanted to play excerpt. I think I should perhaps just drop it. I could show a few images. Let me see. Yeah, that would be the last slide. So before I just reopen a little bit in this direction, I'm just going to show perhaps a few images from, stills from the film. You see a bit from the book. This is chapter on Gilles, and Atlantic Ragaga is the title of the film and of the chapter. So it's about seaweed and this idea of trying to attune to the local ecosystem. And this in company of Iman Zubai, who one sees there. So basically the structure of the film follows her way of engaging and attuning to this environment. Together with us, but we're pretty much following her, or in the end also because I filmed her and there is her voice and different types of intervention. So the structure of the film is pretty much this idea of approaching a new place, and in her case she does that in singing, or more precisely in humming. She pretty much all the time sings, small melodies, and we were walking on these shores. So singing in that case becomes a way of sort of engaging, attuning slowly with the place. But not in a performative way, I sing something to you, but I sing something for myself while I walk and observe and feel. Then there were, yeah?
You need to come to a close because we're already 5 minutes before the session.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
I'm sorry, I know I'm cutting you now.
Well, okay, then I really, I mean, just to say that we made a different number of interventions. So first walking, then interacting with the seaweed. We see her breathing into this plastic tube. Obviously, was about this gaseous exchange between plants and humans, CO2 and oxygen. So this is very sort of staged for the camera, but nevertheless, it's an experiment that you can try to enact and reenact and observe, so see what happens. And then we also made sounds together. Based on some certain scores, and then in the end she also wrote a poem which pretty much translates into this idea of body of water, so it resonates with current feminist theories about the body and watery embodiment. But of course this is very micropolitical, local sort of research, and because where we want to go also perhaps with this symposium is, to see things on a larger plane, not just always the micro-political, but also the macro-political. Comes to this observation that it is indeed difficult to conciliate social justice with ecological justice. Because, and this depends from your position. I mean, there's two remarks, that this idea of rights, justice, and commons can quickly become abstract notions if they are not grounded in concrete processes. We hear about these terms all the time, everywhere, especially in the art world, but it depends who speaks about it and from what position. Then the other thing is that radical ecological discourses in the West often tend to depoliticize differences in positions between humans. Yeah, I'm going to finish. So this idea, this is also very important to me. That's the problem with radical ecology. If it's at the cost of differences between humans, especially inequalities, then it becomes a problem. Because then it's easy to just put humanity against, or together with nature, but the difference between different groups of populations amongst humans is important. So okay, I see some pressure. I feel.
I'm really sorry, but yeah.
So I was going to end by saying that the outcome is to say that solutions need to be found locally in order to make them effective. And in Morocco, there is a sort of important example, which was a protest camp, which took place in Imidor between 2011 and 2019, and their activists were really managing to engage with all these questions for a sort of local perspective, using these indigenous models of decision-making and ecological feminist practice. So this is something that you find in the book if you're interested. I guess we have to interrupt this discussion, but I want to thank you all for coming.